Welcome to the Old Mac Gang Podcast, or OMG, a podcast with a panel of longtime Mac Apple users who want to discuss the most relevant apps and services to age-seasoned users. I'm Marty, an Apple enthusiast and podcaster. I'm a 67-year-old age-seasoned user who's collected some friends together to talk about Apple and the seasoned citizens who use it. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the idea of what are kind of settings that we rely on all the time with the different devices that we have. But before we get into that, let's see who we've got with us tonight on the panel.
I'm Gary. I live in Cleveland, Ohio. My primary Mac tools are my Mac Mini and my iPhone. I find it very useful during the day to enjoy working with it. Peter? Yes.
Hi, I'm Peter. I'm 72 and live alongside Lake Erie in Bay Village, Ohio. I've played and worked with computers since 1968, and boy, have they changed since then. It's been mainly ones from Apple for the past 19 years or so. I love sharing and learning from others, especially this gang here. Chris?
Hey, I'm Chris. I'm 78 years old, a retiree in Tucson, Arizona, and I've been around the Mac since 1984, worked with the Apple user groups and with Apple for a while, and then University IT, and now I'm retired and using current Apple tools and Apple services.
So I didn't prepare Gary for this, but I'm going to put him on the spot a little bit, only because he took a trip last week and you took your MacBook and obviously your phone. Besides the technology, I think you also had some experiences in getting there in terms of taking a flight and all that. So can you share a little bit about your experience with the trip and then any experience with the tech that you had?
Yes, I took my phone, of course, and I took a MacBook Air. And as you know, on Saturday at 10 o'clock, the Cleveland, Northeast Ohio Mac Users Groups has a Zoom meeting for an hour. At the conference, I really didn't use my MacBook Air, but I skipped a couple of sessions that I knew about and plugged in to the Zoom meeting on Saturday. And I was very impressed because I hadn't used it before. The quality of both, of course, the display was good, which it always is, but the speaker, the internal speaker, and the camera, because I use an external microphone on my Mac Mini. I just on the flight, it was at an Embassy Suites in Raleigh, North Carolina. I've thought about driving because I like to drive, and I haven't driven into Virginia or across the PA Turnpike for a number of years, but I ended up flying on American. Oh, I could talk for too long, Marty. I can't say enough about the gate agent that I found who put me in a wheelchair. And it wasn't so much that I couldn't walk. I went from Cleveland to Washington and then to Raleigh. And then coming home, I went through Charlotte. But putting me in a wheelchair got me from one terminal to another. And secondly, it really moved me through the second time at Raleigh through the security. So I met a lot of people, which was the primary that I had only known on Zoom. So that was really the benefit of the conference. Oh, and lastly, I'm the treasurer of this organization. So that's why my primary reason for going. Enough.
Yeah, but the message I just got from you, I think is meaningful to our listeners. That you found a good gate agent who was able to assess sort of what you needed to get around the airport and what you needed to get in off and on the plane and get through security, and was very proactive in it. So for our listeners who might be traveling, it's always okay to ask for help. Don't you're not going to necessarily run into that ticket agent who's going to be able to predict what you need, but it's always good and to ask for help if you need it in terms of traveling beyond the tech that you take and all that. I'm trying to really kind of pull you over, Gary, to the MacBook Air side because next week we'll be traveling to MacStock. And I hope you'll bring that and have that at your desktop or on the table with you when we do MacStock. So tonight's episode is a little bit about we're essentially asking the same question, and this was something that Peter, I think, generated as a question. And the idea here is you'll hear the same question, but you'll get different answers each time from us. We're going to do 3 rounds on this question. And it seems like a large question, but I wanted to give everybody in the group an opportunity to pick what their device was, even if it was the same device for each question. Name one setting that you always have on one of your devices, whether it be the iPhone, the iPad, the iMac, MacBook, or Mac Mini, and the Apple Watch, the Apple TV, or the Vision Pro. And I would naturally pull towards the Vision Pro, but I don't think we have a lot of folks who are using that device. But I wanted to put it into the mix if people had something to say about that. And I think with each round, we're going to start with Peter, then Gary, then Chris, and then myself. And I'll share some links. If you're watching this on the video, you'll get to see the sites that we're talking about as we talk about them. And we'll go ahead and start with Peter on this first.
Yeah, whenever I use a MacBook Pro or really a desktop computer, but I have always used laptops, gosh, forever. One of the first things I set is in the desktop and dock settings. I go into that and I make sure that I automatically hide and show the dock. For me, the dock takes up just too much real estate, particularly when I don't have a monitor attached, as I do in my office at home, where I have a 27-inch monitor when I'm on my 16-inch MacBook. I want my application to fill that screen so that I can see it really well. My eyesight is ever weaker, and I continue to make things a little bit bigger from year to year. And to have that dock take up, that big stripe at the bottom really detracts from usability of a lot of apps. Now, other people may vary, and when you look in that desktop and dock settings area, you're going to see a mess of different settings, and some of them you may want to change. I know that Marty, I think, puts his dock position on one of the sides, and that would kind of do the same thing because your eyes move up and down easier than they move back and forth. So having the dock off to one side allows it to be always visible, but not distracting from what you're paying attention to. The other thing I do now that I'm looking at the settings is I also change the one setting that says window title bar double click action, and I change that from minimize, because I can already hit the yellow stoplight to minimize, to zoom. And when I double click that menu bar, or the window title bar, I'm sorry, it automatically takes that window, if I've only got it on a portion of the screen, and fills the screen. I can do something, then double click the title bar again, and it goes back to where it was. That's very nice. Now, you'll also see a setting on there, or it may be moved to the menu bar section in Mac OS 26, where you can also hide and show the menu bar at the top. That's not so big that I don't want to see it most of the time. But when you're on a machine, if you hit the green stoplight, it puts you in super full screen mode where the menu bar goes away and is automatically in hide or show mode. And when you click it again, it goes back to where it was. So I think that's an unnecessary thing. And I can get back and forth to getting that little bit of space should I ever need it. So that's the one setting for, and I leave the settings that way even when I have a giant monitor. I'm just so used to it, and I find that very comfortable.
Well, I like that, Peter. I'll try it a little bit later. I mostly use a 27-inch monitor. I have my dock on the bottom, small, and not a lot of items in the dock. Uh, I wasn't really exactly sure, Marty, about the question and about something that's always on. And really, I've spoken about 1Password before that I've started with a number of years ago, and I use it primarily as a vault to keep all my information is kept there. So that's comes on when I power up the computer in the morning. So that's my one item, Chris.
Okay. I've traditionally used the dock on the left side of the screen, and I've kept it hidden. I've been recently trying it on the bottom of the screen only because I have so many icons in there. And I tend to make applets with Safari for websites like my credit union and various things I use with Duolingo for my language work. And so I put those in there, but for most of my apps now, I just do the command spacebar and let Spotlight find an app if I don't use it that often. So my addition for this question was actually going to be the setting that is allows the automatic deleting of these OTP codes that we get, the temporary codes with a number that you have to put in when you log into a website. And it's, yeah, if you scroll down, Marty, you'll get past the ads to where it gives the tips and stuff. And so, yeah, and this is a really good thing. And I can't remember actually if it was on by default, but just in case it's not, this webpage, which will be in the show notes, will show you exactly how to get to the setting. And then you can make sure that that's off because, whereas my email inboxes tend to be kind of a free-for-all, when it comes to the text app, I like to keep it fairly curated and current so I can get to things quickly. And it's amazing how much I use it. I use it all day long with lots of stuff, including sending stuff to myself. So, but that would be my addition there, Marty.
Chris, I do that manually now, and you just gave me a tip that I can set that up. I don't know, for some reason I felt like I needed to keep those verification codes for a period of time. And in this site that you sent, it looks like you have to dig down a couple of layers to get to it, but it's simply toggling a switch to say delete them once you've used them. And I use them.
Right.
I wind up using verification codes a lot because I'm going into different websites. They want to do some kind of second factor authentication. It involves verification codes. And so, yeah, that's really cool. I am going to switch that on or off, I should say, as soon as the show's over and I'm done recording the show. My tip or my thing that's always on, I've got three beautiful monitors, and the center monitor that I work on and record from and do the show with, and then the two side monitors that shows you the websites in the video, and another monitor that I have information on, and sometimes my camera controls are on that. But the problem is, if you have a lot of monitors on and you wear glasses, you have a lot of white reflection coming off your monitor. I dream with these three monitors, I would have beautiful panoramas. I actually have one that is a three panel panorama of the lake shore of Chicago. And I grew up in Chicago, hence the Cubs sign in the background. And I like to have that, but if you're doing and recording podcasts and you're recording the video of the podcast, if you have a lot of white light coming at you, you get a lot of glare on your glasses. So I found the way that I get around that is, well, dark mode helps. I can't use that for the websites because showing dark mode, well, I could try. I could switch that to dark mode for people who are viewing the sites on the YouTube stream of this or the video of this. But what I do is I change the background. So all of my wallpapers are solid black. It does a couple of things for me. It makes it easier for me to read things because the text is either in white with, or text is black with a white frame or white background. Or in some cases, like I'm using right now with Ecamm, it's all dark frame with white letter. So it makes the acuity for me a little bit better. So if it's something that's always on, and if I'm using that criteria, it is the fact that my wallpapers are always solid black color. And that's for reading acuity, and it's also for stopping the reflection on my glasses when I'm recording, so I can use other lights from side angles that illuminate my face without having my glasses reflect things straight back. So it's a practical piece for me when doing a lot of podcasts. All right. Next question is the same question. Name a second setting that you always have on one of your devices: iPhone, iPad, iMac, MacBook, Mac Mini, Watch, Apple TV, or Vision Pro. And Peter, you're up again.
Okay, so this one has to do with my iPhone, and a lot of people use their iPhone as a camera, as do I. I use it a lot as a camera. So the setting I changed the moment I'm got my iPhone is one of the camera settings. Now this is only going to apply to people with recent iPhones, iPhone 16s, but if it doesn't apply to your current one, it applies to your next one. So you go into settings, camera, and then camera control. There's been a lot of debate about the usefulness and of the new camera control. Apple calls it a control, not a button. I found it like triggered and did things when I didn't want it to do things. So I went into the camera controls and I turned the camera adjustments off. So I'm not changing between different things by sliding the control. I do leave it set on the zoom level. So once I'm about to take a picture, I can do a little bit of sliding. I have to do it pretty intensively, and it'll change me from the wide angle to the 1x to the 2x to the 5x lenses really nicely. I also set it to single click. I don't remember whether it was single click or double click, but I think you can actually turn those off if you want. But I didn't want to trigger it inadvertently, and that was the setting that worked best for me. And I found that this works really good. In fact, I was at a family event, and one of my relatives wanted me to take some pictures with their camera. And I said, can I change a setting before I do that? And I did, and I took a bunch of pictures. And then they wanted me to tell them, what did you change and why? And I got an email from them a week later saying, I love that setting change. I'm keeping it. It makes the camera much more usable. And of course, you can still do the normal things like hold it down and get the visual intelligence and all that kind of stuff. So it makes the new button usable for me. So Gary.
Well, Gary just got a little simple one that just, I think Peter turned me on to Perplexity a few months ago, and that's really one of my always on. And I even used it, I use it all the time, but specifically today, what's happened, I had the wrong switch turned to off instead of on because I was calling people with my iPhone, and it was the number, it came up as an unrecognized or unknown caller, and they allowed, then they won't, most people, many people will not pick up a call unless they know where it's coming from or have a pretty good idea that it's reasonable. So I went into Perplexity, told her I think of Siri as a feminine. I know there's other voices, but it works my thought process. The problems, and got the solution, and went in with my phone and turned a switch to said something with ID, caller ID, always on. So that's another one of my always on, I guess, apps. Chris.
Yeah, one of the settings that I use all the time on my Mac is something that Apple called Spaces, and there is it's a Unix thing, but basically what we can do when you set these up is you hold down the control key and you use left and right arrows, and you get new desktops. So it's sort of like a lampshade or the old multi-finder way back when, if anybody remembers that. And in practical sense, what this could mean is I could have, mail and messages on one screen. I could have Adobe Lightroom on another screen, have Adobe Photoshop on a third screen, and maybe something else. And I could just flip back and forth, and they're already full screen ready to go. And so Spaces can be tremendously productive and helpful. I use it all the time instead of really having multiple monitors. Um, Also, the other thing I was going to add here is I found something, and we have a link to this, where with the iPhone, when you're taking live photos, this is something that can kind of drive me bonkers. One of my daughters does this, and all of her pictures are live photos, whether they need to be or not. And but there is a setting where you can create a duplicate and have it be a still photo. So for people that are kind of addicted to live photos or don't know how to turn it off, anyway, there's instructions for the settings for both of these. So that's sort of an interesting possibility. And I do admit that there is a place for live photos because it's like shooting a short burst mode. And when you're getting pictures of people, you may just be able to pick the one where everybody's eyes are open in a group photo. So yeah, there's definitely a place for it. Although I will say historically that Apple confused the hell out of everybody when they first introduced it because they didn't explain what it was and nobody knew what the heck was going on. But that's another story. But at any rate, so those are my two things for here. Marty?
I forgot to say the last time when I was talking about changing your wallpaper. And the link is in the show notes. There's like a 45-second video where from YouTube where the person goes through the steps that you can do to change your wallpaper background and how to do that. For folks who might be struggling with that or don't know how to do it, that link will be in the show notes and you'll be able to see the video play out and follow that along pretty easily if you want to change your background to whatever you want to change it to, or like me, if you want to keep it just a black wallpaper for your own acuity and such. My tip, I guess the always on thing that I do is thinking about my phone. So last time it was Mac OS, this time it's going to iOS. Thinking about my phone in particular is the action button. And what was the space where the action button was used to be a toggle switch. And it was simply set to either Do you want to on it off, or do you want silence? Do you want to silence your phone? I love that. I absolutely love that. That was my way of connecting with easily turning my phone on and off the way I do. So they came out with the action button, and there's a gazillion things that you can do with the action button. You can attach it to all sorts of things. But I am just so old school. You know what that action button is? Press it once, phone is silent. Press it again, the phone is available for ringing or whatever kind of disturbance you want. I do have a link that comes from Apple support on how to customize the action button and the choices that you have from focus, camera, visual intelligence, flashlight, voice memo, recognize music, which is always the thing for me. I'll get into a restaurant, something will play and it's sort of, I like that. I want to recognize it, and then I want to save it in my Apple Music. Translate, magnifier, your control center, shortcut, accessibility, or you can set it to do nothing. That it's just kind of a dumb button there. But these directions will show you how to do that and how to make that setting. I wish I could have about 10 of them on my phone instead of having to make a choice. And the one on the left will be the button that I use to silence it, and the one on the right will be the button that'll do music. Of course, I can ask the S lady to do all this stuff for me too. Chris, you had a comment?
Yeah, what would be really cool if Apple could make that button contextually aware, so that when you're in one app, it could do something else, and in another app, it could do a third thing. And then for you, with silencing the phone, you just do it with a long press instead of the short press. So that would be a really neat thing, hint, hint, for the future.
And we know Apple is listening because they're always listening, right?
Yeah.
Third question, same question as the first two.
Peter had a
Yeah,
question.
Peter, okay.
I just wanted to say two things. One is you can make that button contextually aware through shortcuts. I mean, if you assign it to a shortcut, the shortcut that it's assigned to can test for context. The other thing I forgot to say when I mentioned the camera button is, and this is for both Marty and Chris, but I think Chris would especially like this, is the camera button can be assigned to any camera. So when I was out on a recent nature shoot, I had the camera button assigned to the Indigo camera you recommended, from which I got some pretty incredible shots. And then I had the action button set to take me back to the standard camera. So
I want it to be assigned to someone else's camera on somebody else's phone, so I can see the pictures they're taking. Peter, you've got the third round of this question to start with.
Okay, so the third round is my iPad. And on an iPad, one thing I'm totally devoted to, and one of them is, I think, default, and the other one maybe I think I initially had to set up, and that is the swiping your finger from the corner. That's in the settings under multitasking and gestures. And when you swipe up from the bottom right corner, you get an Apple Note on an iPad, and that continues to work under windowed apps. And when you swipe up from the left-hand corner, you take a screenshot. And I'm really devoted to that. I'm on the bleeding edge testing iPad OS 26 at the moment. And that works when you have it set for full screen apps or Stage Manager, but it does not work when you're set up for windowed apps. So I'm hoping that might be something that gets fixed before the final release, or some other very convenient way to take screenshots. Because for me, the power button and the volume up at the same time is not a convenient way to grab a screenshot, where it's just a swipe from the corner, boom, you got it.
Wow, great, Peter. Great ideas, as usual. I only have another one called Text Expander, which Marty told me about, and he'll talk about it later, so I won't say too much. I just don't have enough opportunities to use it. However, there are a lot of people I deal with that I share that thought with because they, in their line of work and daily, they find it very useful. So it's a very it sure eliminates a lot of duplication of and saves time. Chris.
Yeah, my third one is, and I'll generalize this on this in a minute, but specifically, I read from the iPhone Life people that there is a switch to turn off personalized Apple ads. And I guess we do get them from time to time. And, for some people, that may get either boring or annoying to have the same kind of ads coming up all the time. And so you can depersonalize them, and there is a setting to do that. But more generally, and this is something I've also sort of picked up from the iPhone Live folks who I really recommend, is that there are annoyances that we may have with the Mac, or things change. Like our vision is changing, like Peter mentioned earlier. We need to make fonts bigger and stuff like that. It's really worth it for the productivity to look into these things. And now that we've got Perplexity and ChatGPT and things like that, you can just ask all sorts of tech support questions in there. Just be specific enough, and you'll find out if you're not, because it won't know. But you get a lot of answers and things that really can be taken care of. There are all sorts of accessibility settings for seniors that are, quite frankly, it is so complicated. I have suggested to a couple of people, depending on your needs, you might want to call Apple and say, I've got a question about accessibilities. I'd be fine with getting a call back. You can also do this through the Apple chat mechanism. And I've had a friend with an advanced networking problem, and he said, I want to call back, and here's my problem. And the fellow that called him back knew exactly the answer right away. Boom, 5 minutes he had it. So don't be afraid to ask about this stuff, because the machines nowadays, whether they're iPhones, iPads, Macs, whatever they have incredible range of all of these incremental improvements that Apple's been making in the past 5 years and 10 years that make it a completely different animal than it was 10 years ago. Marty?
Yeah, I want to. You reminded me, Chris, of the Tips app, and now when you load new operating systems, and even if you don't load it, you can search in the App Store for the Tips app. Frankly, when we do tips, we're not doing them tonight on tonight's show because that's all we're doing is tips through these questions, really. But when we have to do tips, I go to the Tips app, and there is a whole layout of ways to do stuff. And there is a whole section on accessibility and things that you can do with accessibility. So to reinforce, there's so much there. Sometimes I used to say, I don't need the Tips app. I don't, but to me, it's like reading an encyclopedia. Sure, probably half of what's in there in an encyclopedia, and that's reinforcing. But at the same time, everything you need to know is in an encyclopedia, and you'll find it in that one place, in that one, 26 volumes or whatever it is. Same thing with the Tips app. If whatever device you're using, you have the Tips app on it, open it up, take a look at it, and see what menu options there are for you, and all sorts of different. Generally, it's specific to the device that it's on, but still, that's what you want when you're looking for it on the device. So my suggestion here, again, the question always on. My suggestion is programs that when I boot up my Mac are always on and running in the background. And you can have a lot of these, and some of them you don't even know that they're running in the background and they're clutter, or you loaded them at some point. But these are the three that I know are always open. And I have a link for directions on how to set up those items or how to remove those automatic items if you want to remove them. And this again comes from the Apple support site. But one that I use, Gary alluded to, is Text Expander. I've talked about it on the show before. That always comes on automatically when my computer boots up. And yes, I'm one of those guys who turns the computer off every night unless I'm processing some video through YouTube. I have to leave it on. But if I don't, it goes off. But this always comes up. It's, it's in my dock and it always comes up with that little dot underneath it. Text Expander does some marvelous stuff in terms of basically creating short text macros. There's some more complicated things it can do. I don't want to say it's complicated to do or for you to be able to do, but it's not just simply a small macro that then generates a couple of lines of text. There's other things that you can do with it that's pretty amazing, and it's a subscription piece. The other one I want to mention is Alfred. Alfred does a lot of things, and it kind of does a good search for things if you're looking for stuff. It also does a wonderful job of some key combinations and hotkeys. It'll also look for, if you have a keyword, it'll search for keywords and things like that. And you can create a variety of workflows with it that I'm showing here within the Alfred app. Again, links to this all in the show notes, either on the video version in the comment section or the show notes section, or within the podcast, you'll find it in the notes. And then the third one that's a must-have that I have always on, it's part of my startup, is Text Sniper. Text Sniper, you can get it as a standalone product, or if you're part of SetApp and that whole SetApp format, it's one of the apps that are in SetApp. And what Text Sniper does is it resides up in the dock of your, and you have it set to always open up. You'll see this little target up in your dock, and you can click on it, and then you can suggest that you want to capture text. In any text that's anywhere on the screen, it will capture it like optical character recognition, and it will put it in your clipboard, and then you can drop it into whatever, from your clipboard, or by right-clicking, you can just drop it into whatever document you want to drop it into or such. It is really great in terms of that. And frankly, when I'm doing show notes for the show and other shows, I get websites open that I want to have. I will copy the URL, then I'll go back and I'll use Text Expander to capture the title. And then I'll put the title, I'll drop it right above the URL in the show notes. And also those show notes then get transferred into the notes that you see in the video version or the podcast version. So I use it constantly for capturing text. Instead of me looking at the title and having to type it all in, I can just clean it up, scan over a box of it, and then pull it in and drop it into whatever I'm going to use. So when I think of Always On, I think of Mac and Open at Login. These are the three programs that open at login for me: Text Expander, Alfred, and Text Sniper. So that's my contribution there. Any other comments, gentlemen? All right. Hearing none, I'm going to close the show out and thank you for joining us for the evening and for the Old Mac Gang. You can email us at the podtalknetwork@gmail.com. We appreciate your feedback. That's why you should email us. And you're our viewers or listeners, and the feedback helps us tailor programs for you, ones that you want. particularly age-seasoned users like us who want to continue using our Macs to make our lives more enjoyable. You can find out about us and other projects and podcasts that are part of the Pod Talk network at thepodtalk.net. That's our website. You can find out more of it there. Gary and I and Bob, who's not with us tonight, he's at a board meeting and couldn't be there, but we're all going to meet up at MacStock coming up July 11th, 12th, and 13th in Crystal Lake. And I think we might try to do a show from there, or some type of a show. I don't know. Gary and I are probably going to go to breakfast and go to Portillo's and eat lots of bad food. Maybe we'll do a live, just how's it going at MacStock and what have you learned, and how age-seasoned users can have that experience. But we will do a show next Wednesday again, July 9th at 9 p.m. We'll be live streaming through YouTube. You can watch this crew at youtube.com at Old Mac Gang, and you can pick up the podcast or video later if you missed the live show. So share it with your friends and other seasoned Mac users and become part of the regular group with the Old Mac Gang. Our music bed is by Phillip Gross, Marrakech, courtesy of the Free Music Archive and part of the Creative Commons. More information about this podcast and others, as I said, can be found at thepodtalk.net. Thanks for the group, Chris, Peter, and Gary, and Bob sometime in the future, because he's going to be traveling for a while. But we'll see him at MacStock. And thank you for being part of the Old Mac Gang. We'll see you next time.